Hello, my name is Corey Young. I'm a sound designer and I currently work at Sumo Newcastle. I've worked in the games industry for 5 years and I started off my journey at the Chinese Room. However, over the past few years I've made the move to Sumo Newcastle. I've worked on various games such as Little Orpheus, Hood, Outlaws and Legends, Still Wakes the Deep, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, and Death Sprint 66. In my spare time, I tend to play various games, ranging from fantasy to RPGs, from first-person shooters. I play everything I can. As much as I enjoy playing these games as a player, I often spend a lot of time critically listening to the soundscapes within these games. What do I mean by critically listening? Well, instead of just playing through the game and just taking the sound on board at face value, I ask quite a lot of questions as to why or how they've done certain things. This can range from implementation, design decisions, or even just the overall soundscape and what it means towards the player. This is a valuable lesson to learn when doing sound design for games. The reason why is because it will help you inform what players find important or what also sets the tone for the game. I've recently been playing Dragon's Dogma 2. Everything feels cohesive, there's a nice overall relation from all the elements within the game, and at times it can feel very epic. However, after playing for a while, I've started to notice a few things that could be improved. This can be from certain things in the ambience to combat. The goal of this video is to look at various clips and analyse them. From this analysis, we can then do a few redesigns of our own. The main goal I want you to take away from this video is a greater appreciation of what is going on behind the scenes, whether you're a sound designer or not, and I encourage you to think of how you would do things. One of the most important skills you can have as a sound designer is to look through various clips like these and analyse them, and discuss your approach on how you would do things. Everyone is unique, and there are no right or wrong answers. I want to say I really appreciate the sound designers on this game and their work. All I'm doing here is just trying to see how I would approach it if I was in this particular scenario myself. With that, let's get on with the video. Okay, so let's get on with this video. What I've done is I've taken a few clips of various areas. We have a small checkpoint area, a city, some interiors, then obviously some areas with like foliage, and then we finish off. I want to do some combat redesigns, so we will go through these pretty quickly. It won't take too long discussing them because I don't want this video to be overly long. Just some bite-sized information to take away. So with that, let's get started. So the first part we're going to start off with is the checkpoint rest town. This is an elevated kind of town on the top of kind of like a hill. So pretty open, but also a lot of interesting activity kicking off around the city. So what I'll do with these clips is I'll just play them raw, discuss basically what I've added in afterwards, and then just play it with my edits on top. I've not done every single clip because that would take forever. I've done a few redesigns here and there, but mainly it's just to get like a kind of impression of how I would approach this. So let's start with this first clip. Make it a bit bigger as well. So as you can tell, what I've done here is I've reduced the music and the voice sliders on the game, and the idea here for that was I wanted to really just analyse what was going on underneath the ambience. A lot of the ambience in this game is made up from NPC voices, but the problem that I find is a lot of the NPC voices are just essentially full lines, and you have the text above their heads. There's no mumbles, coughs, or any kind of just general human noises. So with that, I thought I would approach this scene with that in mind of, right, okay, there's quite a lot of people here, like, let's just try and make them feel a bit more alive. One of the other things I noticed is there's just this kind of bass wind loop. There's not a lot of activity sounds or whatever, and one of the ways you can do this is in games, although this person isn't moving, if you move away from him, you can actually start to hear, I don't know, maybe him picking up a plate or something, or like eating. It's just playing around with the distant areas to make the city feel a lot more alive than it actually is. But I will unmute my edits for this basically this rest town, and then we'll play it again just to see how that sounds. So a bit over the top near the end, but yeah, just little various things. People sawing, hammering their houses, etc. And then just sneezing. All these little things can build up a scene and really make it a bit more impressive. It seems like really simple stuff, but this is one of the things that I've noticed in certain games where, with ambience in particular, they don't really give it that much attention. And then the problem with that is a scene like this, which is absolutely beautiful, I think, as a sound designer, it kind of falls flat because it feels like you're not really immersed within that city. I don't believe that these people are doing anything. If I know I've turned down the voices, it is a little bit more immersive when you turn up the voices, but in terms of their day-to-day lives, that's one thing that sells a great kind of city immersion for me, is just people doing their own thing. They've got their own schedules, and even if they aren't, even if you never see someone sawing or hammering, at least you just hear that in the distance. But yeah, that's the first clip done. Let's move on to the second one. Okay, so the second area, again, this is the main city in the game. A bit different from the other area. It's more enclosed. There's a lot of people. But for this example, I've turned back up the voice slider so we can actually hear the NPCs talk, which does make it feel a bit more lively. But again, I'll just play this and I'll add in the things I've added on top. So let's go with this clip.
Living hard, but seems right.
Pleasant breeze.
In the mood for a song, it does. Need anything? Sunshine. Well then, son, how might I be of service?
I know every place.
One word.
Again, nothing necessarily bad, but I think there could be a bit more detail in here. The issue with the people speaking the same type of lines is it gets pretty fatiguing coming back and you just say the exact same. There's a lot of lines in this game that don't have much variation. So the ambience is relying on these people talking, but then they end up speaking the exact same amount. So anyway, I've added a bit of reverb into the city and added a few extra sounds. So let's just take a look at what you can do here.
Living hard, but seems right.
Pleasant breeze.
For a song, it does. Need anything? Sunshine. Well then, son, how might I be of service?
I know every place.
One word.
So as you can tell there, it's maybe a bit over the top. There's a walla, and this is just like murmurs that you can fill out a city. They could probably be pushed back a bit further in the mix, but I brought them up just for the sake of it. It's little things like people banging or just like moving things in different rooms, sneezing, laughing, just, yeah, fill it out, give it a bit more space. And then, yeah, distant dog barking, a classic for city stuff. But yeah, that's really all there is to it. It's nothing revolutionary. It's just after playing it and adding these things in, it's like, oh, you really wish these cities or etc. just felt a bit more alive. But anyway, that's the second part. Let's move on to the third one. Another analysis that I've had is the reverb zones in this game are very dry and they don't tend to have that big boominess that for certain areas like this, like a palace, would have. Or they're just rooted in a different way. But let's just take a listen as to what's going on here. So I don't know if one thing that I don't understand here is it sounds like kind of like a plate or spring reverb. It doesn't sound like an actual impulse response, and I don't know if this is due to technical limitations, but I just added on a kind of alt verb, kind of church on top, and it made a massive difference for me. Let's just listen with that. Obviously, it's pretty wet over the top, but it's just to make a stark difference. Yes, you really get a difference when you toggle it off and on. It seems like their weapon is rooted pretty heavily through it, but yeah, the character's Foley isn't, which is one of the most important. If you're wearing all plate armor and you walk into this massive stone structure, you want to hear that resonate. That was just a quick test there, but yeah, I'd be curious as to why they went that direction. I'm sure there's an answer, but yeah, this is just another thing to pay in mind, is just make your spaces believable in terms of the reverbs. For the Snicks example, we're just above the city. This is just a quick one. Added the music back in just to see what that sounds like, because the music again does fill out the space quite a lot, but let's go for it.
Now, this is a place to forget one's troubles. The welcome refinement wasn't something
Again, just feel like it falls a bit flat. The cape's missing sounds, that even though the trees close to us are not moving that much, I think the ones in the distance could be. And if you look at the end, you're in this massive open valley, which would sound pretty windy. Although, again, these aren't moving, you could do quite a lot. So this is just another example. You can see I've went over the top with the foliage a little bit here, but it's just to kind of fill out again with more winds. Oh, I forgot to select this one too.
Now, this is a place to forget one's troubles. The welcome refinement wasn't something
Yeah, very quickly done. Could spend a lot more time on that, but just to give an example of, yeah, if you're going to have wind, kind of have it all tied together. One way that you could do this, and it was something I worked on when working on Bloodlines 2, is you could have this one value linked to VFX. Like this could be from 0 to 1, and it could be like the amplitude of the wind. So once the VFX pulls up and starts blowing these in the cape, it's all tied together to one value. And with this, you can drive a lot of the sounds, which is probably the easiest way to do it. That way everything's tied together, you don't get this inconsistency with like wind sounds when nothing's happening. That's how I'd approach it anyway. But yeah, that's just another quick example of that one there. In these next 2 videos, I haven't done redesigns per se, but I would like to highlight a few things that I found. So this one is on the way to the forest. Again, with this one here, you're in an open space. The wind just sounds pretty steady. One thing, again, is just to add some wind gusts, especially in these arches. You could have like a spline going along and just variably just moving up and down. I think that's one of my main complaints as a player and as a sound designer, is there's not enough variation. It always just this one steady kind of tonal loop. In the second section, let's go for that. I think the sounds here have the right intention. My only concern is they sound a bit boxy. They sound pretty filtered. But the intention's good. There's quite a lot. There's crows, there's creaking, there's a lot of variation. But the way I think they've implemented this is they've used user-defined positioning from Wise, and this is just a quick way of positioning sounds around the player with random paths. It's usually used within open world games like this because it's impossible to mark everything up. But the best way to do it is to kind of do a hybrid approach. So for the trees, if these are all blueprints, or say it was in Unreal or something, you could attach specific emitters to these, which could limit the voice count by using multi-set positioning. And then you could have more of the winds randomly placed. That way, the issue is with this is because they've got like random leaf sounds using that user-defined positioning. You could sometimes enter stone areas where there's no trees around or no grass, and you hear that, and it can be pretty distracting because it just takes you out of that experience. But it's just another thing to keep in mind when using user-defined positioning. You could use that method they've done, but they need to override. If you enter a zone, they could just turn that stuff down. So, yep, that's that third part, sorry. And then we're going to go on to the fourth part. So yeah, again, I think this sounds really nice. It's got like a nice solitude kind of vibe kicking about. The music does quite a lot in this game when you're exploring. One thing I'd add is maybe more of a positional wind sound as you went into here from the trees and the foliage behind you, but that's just being a bit nitpicky. But that is kind of it for the forest and ambience parts from the cities. So I think what I'll move on to next is the combat in caves. So for the combat in this game, there's a lot of it. You're always fighting like mini gangs or monsters, and then you also have massive kind of mini bosses to fight too. And it can get very overwhelming at times. I think the game does a good job of keeping things from getting too fatiguing because you're doing it quite a lot. But I then think it suffers a lot from not sounding that epic enough. There's a lot of weight lacking on certain things, and I don't know if that's a design decision because you're doing it so much, but yeah, that's something we'll just explore quickly here. So let's have a quick look at just some combat in the cave area. So yeah, again, nothing sounds terrible here. It's just it sounds a bit flat. So what I've done here is I've added again more reverb because it didn't seem like there was much here, and I just added a bit more dynamics on the transients for the sword hits, the parries, etc. And then just quickly bash together a bit of more of an epic fire spell because I find the magic in this game, it looks really cool, but just sometimes just falls flat again. So let's hear it with the adjustments. So yeah, just quickly, I'll solo just what I've added. It was done pretty quickly. I could probably do a better redesign if I had the time, but yeah, I just wanted to make the sword impacts a bit more crunchy, the blocking, the parrying just feel a bit more weighty. It doesn't really give you that feeling that you're a knight in heavy armor. So yeah, that's just one thing to keep in mind. And for this last section here, again, just added a bit of reverb on this small bit. So let's just play it without the reverb. Again, I think the wood sounds are perfect here, and just the overall foley does sound good, but it just lacks that kind of enclosed feeling. So obviously add a bit of reverb. And this is the thing, reverbs can do wonders for your games. They can really immerse you within that environment, but it can also just evoke a lot of things that the sounds can't do on their own. Like walking through here, we're hearing your armour resonate off the walls and just the tighter areas can make you feel a lot more isolated, whereas there's not much of a change as you traverse through different areas in the game, and that's a bit of a shame. And then the last part again is just some combat. So yeah, I'll play it without the reverb or the additions I've made. Again, I think it sounds good, but it just lacks that crunchiness, and that's kind of what I've tried to achieve here. There's always a lot of gore, and it's a shame that you don't get that. So that's kind of what I've tried to do there. If I just solo the. Yeah, especially, you don't need to do this all the time. It could literally be something like a finisher on a character. It could be a bit more epic, but yeah, that's kind of just it for me. I just wanted to quickly go through certain areas and clips that I've taken in the game. I really enjoy playing it and I've had a lot of fun, but there's certain moments like these that kind of take me out of the experience. I'm curious if non-sound designers ever think of this when playing games. Is there certain things that you subconsciously don't like notice, and then you feel a bit, this doesn't feel as immersive, etc. But yeah, that's one thing I'd be curious to gather some research on. But yeah, thanks for watching. This is the first part of like a mini series where I just kind of break down small parts of games. I don't want it to be super long or super in depth because people would get bored very quickly, I imagine. But maybe one day I'll do something like that. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.